We need a level of paranoia. It's better to be paranoid than occupied. Why would you mine something if you believe that Russians would never attack because Americans are defending? We see that happening somewhere else, right? We know, okay, that has been very clear. But when it happens to you, would you know it, that this has started?
On Vladimir Putin's doorstep, a tiny nation of 2 million people are drawing up war plans for a possible invasion. As Russia's threat multiplies across Europe, Lithuania is on edge. Officials in Lithuania warned that Russia is ramping up GPS jamming operations against the country, with pilots reporting more than 1,000 disruptions in June. It marks a massive increase, with 585 incidents recorded in May and 447 in April. And security chiefs have identified the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad, which shares a border with Lithuania, as the source of the interference. But Lithuania's former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Gabrielius Landsbergis, believes his nation is putting in the correct measures to push back against Putin's forces.
I'm terribly proud that last year we reached 3.5% of GDP towards defense. So for us, it's not an easier thing to do rather than, for UK or France, right? So it's still very difficult to convince your people that you're not going to spend the money on, police salaries or teacher salaries or infrastructure, but basically you're going to spend that on German tanks. People have to understand why you're doing this with their money. So we are doing that. Then there are, a bit too slow for my taste, a push to actually think about the defense lines on the border between Lithuania and Belarus. What I would like to see is, wherever possible, new forests being seeded. That you would plant trees, because we still have a lot of open space, which would potentially be used for tanks to roll over. I would like to see an actual defense line being built with mines, ditches, infrastructure such as dragon teeth prepared. So basically we are taking this really seriously, because it works in two ways. First of all, shows to the enemy that we're serious, right? So we are taking the threat seriously. All the defensive measures cannot be considered escalatory, because it's basically just us building a stronger lock. And it tells our allies that what we are preaching, that what we are asking our allies to do, we're doing first at home. That is one part. The second part, which then a bit goes outside Lithuania, but I think it's very important to mention that Lithuania has an agreement with Germany about the deployment of full combat-ready brigade in Lithuania starting 2027. So we will be seeing 5,000 German troops, in full gear, full equipment, deployed and ready to fight in case there is any sort of a emergency, a military emergency in my country. I would say that this provides a strategic difference for a country being without this contingent and because it is a major deterrent. Russians have to take this into consideration, that they would be attacking not just Lithuanian troops, but German troops from a get-go. The basic scenario, under pretense of which NATO is preparing for a potential escalation with Russia, is basically something what we have seen used against Ukraine. Big, powerful force assembled on one side of the border, threatening to attack, maybe some cyber events, some hybrid events prior to that, and then invasion starts. So this sort of scenario for NATO, in NATO's minds, allows enough time for NATO to prepare and assemble. Basically, you would have 200,000 Russian troops, but nominally you would probably expect 400,000 NATO troops to be assembled in Lithuania to deter, and in case Russians still are crazy enough to try that, this amount would basically push them out. I've always advocated for having in mind different scenarios, not a Ukrainian one, but specifically tailored to the Baltic states, and which would look something more akin to an extended hybrid event that would be very difficult for us, for Lithuania or any other Baltic state, to trigger Article 5, because it would be a very difficult scenario to explain to our Western allies that, okay, this is an attack. I was asked in several conferences to elaborate on these scenarios, and one of the scenarios that I've used is a scenario where a train, one that passes through Lithuania almost daily from Moscow to Kaliningrad, is full of Russians, especially now Russians going to Baltic seaside for vacation. Imagine if that sort of a train basically stops for some malfunction, a cyber, technical, whatever, mechanical, inside Lithuania. People start texting, we're in trouble, we need some help, we need assistance, and Putin would say, we need to send just a tiny detachment of border control people, of border guards, accompanied maybe by the police, in order to assist those in the train. It all escalates in in a matter of hours. So the train stops in hour 2, T+2, you have a contingent already entering in Lithuania. Then you have a question: should we shoot? Should we basically stop them? What sort of a thing should happen? And then the Putin would say, well, I mean, the police and border guards are in danger. They need to be accompanied by soldiers, and voila, basically you are on a very fast escalation of that. And my point in all this is, so we go to Brussels and we say, look, we are under attack. And I imagine a big group of our allies in the West would say, well, are you really? Maybe you're just overreacting, right? It's a normal civilian rescue situation. Just help Russians with whatever you can. Don't shoot, don't escalate, just take it slow, maintain a cool head. And maybe we are convinced by that. And then next thing you know, basically we lose at least partially the control of all of our territory, or at least part of it. So that is the principle which I'm always advocating. Let's think not about the scenarios which we are accustomed to, which were easier for us to determine and deter that this is actually happening, because Russians will definitely not provide us an easy scenario. So for these hybrid type of scenarios, it is very difficult to prepare, because the first you have to prepare the political class even more so, rather than the military. So that means that the people in Brussels, in Washington, in London, and anywhere else in Warsaw and Vilnius have to be prepared more than the military. That means that we have to be ready to meet Russia's challenge, because if we don't, well, the military might not know what to do in case that happens.
The war is always avoidable, but it's up to Russia now and Mr. Putin to decide which path he wants to choose.
I believe that there is a sort of mentality in all this, because the belief in transatlantic deterrence, basically in simple words, it means that Russians would never attack Americans or something that is protected by Americans. That was so overwhelmingly strong that basically you don't need any other plan. And I will always say, okay, fine, I still have believed that Americans have an interest in safe and secure Europe as well as Baltics, right? But what if, for example, there is an additional conflict in Indo-Pacific? What if China decides to attack Taiwan at the same time, to divide the attention, and Americans are just unable to be with us at the time of need? And for example, or they would be delayed 2 weeks, a month, 3 months. What would be left of our country if we're just depending on a single point that Americans are here to defend us? I'm not even going to considering that they are changing their posture to a point where they are changing whether they would defend Europe, because at least during the NATO summit that has been denied and confirmed that Americans are going to continue defending Europe. So I think that this is the main issue. We need to tackle this and start thinking about these what if scenarios, which are not necessarily very, very well planned at this stage, and might be very dangerous to us in NATO.